Hey, Difference Maker, welcome to the Difference Maker Revolution podcast. And today begins the first episode of 3 series where we're going to talk about megatrends. So we're going to talk about what is a megatrend and how are these megatrends affecting the photography industry. And we're joined for this series by 2 incredible strategists who probably think deeper than anyone else inside of our industry with a strategic brain. So super excited for this. So before we dive into this, Ronan, what is strategic planning and why is it important to do?
Great question, Jonathan. And, you know, when I think about strategic planning, it's about understanding, first of all, where you want to go, but also looking into the future and connecting bits of information you have from a whole lot of different sources to try and predict what the future might be. Now, nobody can predict the future, right? But what we can do is we can look at the past historically for what has happened. We can look for various trends in different things, right? And often trends can be big trends like the rise and fall of empires, which Brad will love to talk about, I'm sure. That they can be really long trends. And then within those big, long trends, you can have small trends. So just an example is typically an empire rises and falls. We're in a 250 to 300 year period. So that's a big, long timeline of a trend, right? But within that, then you have mini trends. So a mini trend like a recession and growth often is within an 8-year trend, with the recession somewhere between 18 months and 2 years. So that's just an example of trends and stuff like that. But I'm sure Brad will give you his perspective, being a lover of all things military and military strategy and battlefield strategy. And really, business is a battle, right? It's a battle to deliver for our clients, and it's a battle to beat our competition, in a friendly way. We're not going to take them out with guns or anything, but it is a battle. It's a battle for the hearts of clients and consumers, and every photographer is in a battle for the heart of their clients too. So Brad, I know John's going to ask you now about your view on strategic planning and your love of military and how they align.
Well, thank you, Ronan, for rambling there. But yes, I do have a question for Brad. So Brad, I wanted you to think about a time when you implemented strategic planning for your photography business. And when you think of that time, just share with the audience, what was the main reason for you needing to go about this strategic planning? What did it involve? What were you trying to achieve? What were you looking at? Just give us a brief rundown of that time you used it for your photography business.
So it was around 8 years ago that I started to actually develop greater plans. So I started to plan for longer distance, years into the future. And by planning years into the future, I had a wealth goal, and to achieve the wealth goal, I needed the studio to produce X amount of income. So then I just broke that down. And that was really the first time I actually devised a plan or a marketing plan that would encompass the full year. Because I'd been messing around with ads probably for 3 years up until then. It took me about 3 years to kind of get my feet and make them consistent. I'll get to the point where the ads would deliver me a consistent result. And then I just had to scale that up. So to scale that up, I needed a plan. I needed a strategic plan in order to determine, what my marketing budget was going to be, how many sessions, how many phone calls we're going to make, how many bookings we're going to have, what my movement ratio was, what my average order value was. I had to really plan all that out so I knew if we're on track to hit targets.
And what would have been the consequence if you hadn't set aside that time to plan for the future and what you wanted to achieve?
I wouldn't have anything I have now. Realistically, I wouldn't. We wouldn't have grown the business past where the business was, because through strategic planning, you understand where you want to go, which is the key thing. You're not going to go anywhere if you don't even know where you want to go. And then you can break it backwards down from that point. And then looking at everything that you want to achieve, it then gives you targets. So you need to know where you're going. You need to know what it takes to achieve it. So you need targets, and then you need action. So you need to actually do the action every day to be able to achieve that. So without the planning element, without the strategy, you'd just be, waiting for the phone to ring, answering the call, and I'm just living in the here and now. And there's a good argument that I perhaps live in the future too much, and think ahead and plan and overthink, and I do, because I love it. I love strategy. I love making plans. I love making little schemes, and I'm happiest when I see them realized. That's when I'm happiest. I'm happiest in making a plan, delivering on said plan, and then getting a result for said plan.
So for those listening, probably thinking, why do I need to do this? Like, what's the point of me thinking about strategic planning and thinking about how these trends can affect my industry and affect me? And Ronan, one of the risks of not planning is that we risk stagnation, or we risk the danger of not evolving. So talk to me, what does stagnation mean? And I think you are going to share some real life stories of companies who didn't evolve and then suffered the consequences.
Absolutely, Jonathan. But before we talk about stagnation, I think, to add to what just Brad has just said, I think it's a really important thing. And it reminds me of a great quote by Marshall Goldsmith. And it goes like this: what got you here won't get you there. How successful people become even more successful. So as part of this strategic planning, understanding where you want to get to and putting a plan in place and devising the tactics and taking action, you've got to realize that what got you to where you currently are probably won't get you to the end of your strategic plan. So like, what are you missing? That could be a resource, it could be people, it could be a skill set, it could be, all of those things together. So just knowing that. But you're absolutely right with regards to stagnation. This happens nearly everybody, every business, every country, that often we can get to this period of stagnation. And often it's, we run out of the desire, the skills, or we think there's no need to evolve, and many companies have done this in the past, right? So if we take Kodak as an example, because we're talking to photographers, right? Like, Kodak invented the digital camera in the 1970s, and they chose to put it on ice and not develop it because somebody was making a decision that they were afraid that it was going to wipe out film and therefore wipe out their revenue. And they were right. That's what happened in the end, right? But they didn't take advantage of the invention because it was going to go there anyway. Yeah. So somebody, probably accountants, nothing against accountants, but they're normally not good strategic planners, probably made a decision that no, we're going to shelve that because we need to protect our revenue and protect our profits, which is around film. So if you do that, eventually somebody's going to cannibalize you. And the great Steve Jobs, who I absolutely love, always said, cannibalize yourself before your competition cannibalizes you. So I'm sure Kodak could have looked at that and developed out a plan to be the leader in digital photography and transition their business over time in that rollout. But they chose not to do it.
And that's hard. And Ronan, I think you have a quote where from a guy called Roger that speaks to this idea of cannibalizing and how it can be difficult.
Yeah, and I think it's a great quote because it's linked into human nature, right? It actually describes human nature because I can see myself in this. and this is what the quote says: it's easy to come up with new ideas. The hard part is letting go of what worked for you 2 years ago, but will soon be out of date. And if you think about all the decisions you make, in not just in business, but in life, right? That it's so accurate, isn't it? that often we want to try and ignore what the actual reality is, and we don't let go of what we've had and what we've built. The fear of that gets in the way. But often you go out of date, and Nokia is an example of that. In terms of before Apple ever invented a phone, Nokia were the market leader, right? Fascinating strategic story, but we won't go there today as to how they even got into making phones, Nokia. But they lost sight of what was happening. And another phone company around was Motorola, right? And Jeanine, who's on vacation this week, one of our great mentor team, worked in Motorola. And Jeanine was part of the team that built a prototype of a Motorola phone with a camera in it. And somebody or some team in Motorola decided that no consumer would ever want a camera in a phone. And today everyone has it in their pocket. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, maybe. When hindsight's great, isn't it?
It is. But the point is that, that's what strategy is all about. And strategy is not about predicting the perfect future or the future that it's going to be. It's putting information together. And it's a bit like gambling, but it's calculated gambling, in terms of it's looking at the future to say, well, what could happen, and using various tools to determine and predict what it might be. And it's rare that you'll get this 1,000,000% right, because you won't predict a lot of things from the point of view of the timing exactly as to how it's going to happen. Even the great generals who went to war, they may have had a plan, right? But if something changed, they had to be able to change. But the fact that they planned in the first place allowed them to make the right decisions when they needed to change en route to victory. Yeah. So the same applies here.
And we'll talk to some of those tools briefly in a moment. But Brad, this quote fascinates me a little bit about the hard part is letting go of what worked for you 2 years ago, but will soon be out of date. Can you remember a time where, any time in your business where something was working and then it stopped and you had to let it go because it was no longer relevant?
Yeah, a lot in marketing. So a lot, years ago, we did a tremendous amount of like door drops or mail delivery. And it felt like overnight that failed. It's quite a funny thing, isn't it? That when you, all these things, if you don't have like a wider picture for consumer trends and a wider picture of strategy and where people are going, it feels when something happens, it happens overnight. When in reality, it's not happened overnight. It's been happening for a long time, very slowly. You just too laser focused in on what you're doing. You don't see the big picture. So for us, when consumers, when every business in the UK was essentially doing door drops and sending everybody mail, and everybody had like 20 to 30 letters sticking out the front door, eventually people got that fed up with it that they took themselves off those mailing lists, or they just binned it all because they got fed up. And you don't see that. It's like a tipping point. You don't know when that tipping point is finally going to come, but the effectiveness of that ad, of that marketing strategy, just started to dwindle. So when that happened, other things came about, like Groupon. Groupon was fantastic, but like in anything, you get all your early adopters, and then your like early majority, and then it goes into your your majority, and then it goes into like the I suppose the laggards, the people who finally use the product. And for Groupon was never like for luxury businesses. Not that I think my business is particularly luxury, but we sell a product at a decent price point, enough that people need disposable income to be able to afford it. Whereas Groupon's all about discount, discount, discount. So in the early days, Groupon was fantastic because it was a fad. It was new. Everybody was using Groupon. We managed to rebuild our business from like the 2008 recession. Groupon was a key factor in us getting the volume back into the studio. But again, it shifted. All those consumer trends shifted. Groupon's relationship with photographers shifted, and it became the place where people weren't using it because it was fun. People were using it because they just didn't want to spend any money and would just redeem the voucher for the voucher's worth. So that stopped working. And then it's Facebook, and Facebook's gone through like a 10-year change. 10 years I've been operating Facebook ads. And in that time period, it has changed massively. and you just have to pivot and change with it. But it's changed from consumers willing to phone you. So you could just run an ad and ask a consumer to phone your business, and they would phone your business. And then they wouldn't phone, but then they'd message you. So you'd ask them to message your business. And then they wouldn't message you anymore. So then you had to get their details and you had to phone them. And now it's going to the point now where they don't want to be called either way. They want to essentially have all the information relevant to them because everybody's so used to content right now. Everybody's so used to consuming mass amounts of content that people are used to making their own decisions before they speak to a person. So now speaking to a person is becoming more scary. They'd rather see the person talk, make a decision, and then purchase. I personally see that's where Facebook's going, and I'll move with that. But if I was just sat around waiting for people to call the business, nobody would call the business. So it would fail.
So they're almost like micro trends in the industry in certain contexts. And we're going to get into some mega trends shortly. Before we do, Ronan, just bring us briefly through some of the tools used for this strategic analysis, because we could spend, an hour on each of these 5 tools, but just give the audience an overview, because we don't want them to fall asleep or anything gone into detail on the tools. Not that it's not exciting, but I mean, it's high level stuff, right?
Yeah, so we mentioned a little while ago that a lot of strategic planning is joining dots and trying to predict the future, right? Based on a whole lot of things. So there's many strategic tools to help you with that. And I don't like to rely on one of anything, so I don't like to rely on one tool either. So these are strategic tools that I've learned over the years that are really, really useful to do things. And I'm sure many of you have heard of one of them, the SWOT analysis, which is strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And the strengths and weaknesses part of that is looking internally. So looking at your company or yourself, what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses? And the opportunity and threats are looking externally. So what are the opportunities in the marketplace? What are the threats in the marketplace to your business? And what a lot of people don't do when they do a SWOT analysis, they list all them out, but they don't know then how to bring it to the next level. And the next level, the really important one is look at your strengths with your opportunities, right? So cross-reference them, because that shows that you already have the strength to deliver on the opportunity. And then look at the threat and your weakness, right? And that's really good as a photographer to look at, what are the threats? What are my weaknesses? So what do I need to learn? Yeah, what do I need to learn to adapt for that threat that's coming forward? Do you want the other ones as well, Jonathan? Do you want a brief overview of the other ones like that? Or
brief overview, yeah. Go for it.
Okay. So the PEST analysis then is looking externally. So P stands for political. So what is happening politically that could impact on our business, right? Or in the opportunities that are there. The economic then, what's going on? The economy moves between recessions and growth and sometimes depressions, right? So what's happening out there and what impact could that have on our business? Then there's the social, right? So what's happening socially that's going to have an impact going forward. Technology, right? We all hear this one, right? So what's happening in technology that can be an opportunity or a threat? And then environmentally, so what's happening environmentally that can cause something to happen. So right now there's a wave of sustainability out there quite a bit, right? So what does that mean? And what are the opportunities and threats of that to your business, if anything? And then there's the legal piece, right? So we hear a lot about copyright laws. We hear a whole debate about how AI has scraped the internet and, they're breaking copyright and they need to pay for it, but nobody can actually make that happen right now. So there's all those considerations. So that's the pestle analysis, Jonathan. So it's looking at those external forces.
And the next one, Porter's 5 forces.
This is my favorite one. I love Porter's 5 forces. So Porter's 5 forces is looking at the competitive rivalry. So looking within your industry to see how competitive it is, right? So if I'm NVIDIA right now, developing AI chips, I have no real competition, right? So it's no surprise that they got a 90% net profit, right? Right now, they can charge what they want because there's massive demand and they've no competition, right? While in another industry, there may be loads of competition, right? So So from a photography point of view, often photographers say we have a lot of competition. And if we just wear the photography banner, you're right. But that's not what it's about. And we'll talk about it a little bit later. So the threat of new entrants. So like, is it hard to get into? So if I want to make AI chips in the morning, right? It's going to be a massive investment. There's probably intellectual property protecting. I can't get in there, right? Whereas other industries that I can set up tomorrow, right? I can set up tomorrow. The threat of substitutes. So what's coming, that might be a substitute for what I do. So if we take the blacksmiths, right, Jonathan, so the blacksmiths before the Model T Ford was out there, we used to have to put, the blacksmiths used to have to shoe the horses on a regular basis, right? And the Model T Ford came out and people went, blacksmiths, I'm sure, looked at it and went, oh, that'll never catch on, that car thing? No way, we're safe, right? But they were wrong, right? So that's a substitute. It was a substitute for transport. Blacksmiths were not in the shoeing business, they were in the transport business. And the car took over that transport. That was the transport means at the time. And then we have the bargaining power of suppliers, right? So in photography, right, if we buy equipment, they have more control over what they charge than we do as the buyer, right? It's not like we can't really go as a photographer to Canon and say, do you know what? You wanted $3,000 for that camera? No way. It's only worth $1,200. Take my $1,200, and they take your $1,200, right? So the supplier of equipment has more control than us as the buyer, yeah. And the bargaining power of the buyer then is, what bargaining power do our clients have with us? So that's Porter's five forces. I love it. It's a really great tool, especially when you put it together with the others.
So then we have the balanced scorecard approach.
Yeah, the balanced scorecard is sort of around four key things. So financials, so looking financially within the performance of the business, looking at your customers as to how satisfied they are, right? And are you getting repeat business? Are you having your clients come back over and over again? And are your clients driving other clients to you, right? So that's the customer. So they're great metrics to measure against in your business. And the internal processes is about, what you do to run your business. So how efficient is your workflow? How efficient is how you communicate with your clients? Are you using technology to communicate with them, to earn a conversation, to get a booking? What are you using technology in your marketing? They're all your internal processes, right? As to how you deliver for your client to make sure they come back over and over again. And the final piece then is learning and growth, right? As we've just said, the world changes all the time. So we have to have an open mindset to listen, learn, and grow if we want to survive in business. Otherwise, we end up like Kodak.
Yes, Kodiak is a car. All right. So the final strategic analysis is the BCG matrix for service portfolio. These all sound really complicated.
Yeah, they're not really. And they apply to photographers too, right? But it's a great way just to put things into a sort of a category. And I need to explain these categories, right? Because I did not come up with these names, right? Because when I talked about this recently on a webinar, there was a comment saying that Ronan said that pet photography of dogs is going to die, right? Which is not what I said. So the BCG matrix, I did not name this, but it was quite funny at the time. But they talk about stars, right? So your stars are your high growth opportunities, right? So they're the high growth opportunities within your industry that isn't making money yet, but that there's massive potential with them. So you're going to put money into them. Then you have your cash cows, and your cash cows are your products or services that are already established. There's not much growth opportunity in them, but they're creating you the cash to invest in your stars. Yeah. And then you have your question marks, and your question marks are opportunities that there's a lot of question marks around as to whether they can be successful or not, and you're just not quite sure whether you want to put your cash there, right? So an example of that is there's a lot of talk in the industry right now of photography by AI, right? So I would have a lot of question marks around that. I can see that it could be a possibility, but there's still a lot of question marks. It's not a star yet because there's too many question marks around it for me, right? And your dog, and I don't know why they call it dogs, because dogs are lovely, right? But your dogs there's declining demand, right? It's an outdated offering, and you're losing money in it.
Okay, so those are the kind of 5 key tools that were used to develop out the thought process around the megatrends we're going to discuss. So now we're getting into some exciting pieces. We're getting into mega trend number 1, numero uno, and that is the evolution of photographic equipment.
So we've put together 5 mega trends for you, and Jonathan, Brad, and I are going to have a conversation around these now, because I think it's important just to debate it out and think it out, because we're all having a pint of Guinness here and we're all happy and we're just chatting about it. So the evolution of photographic equipment. So if you think about photography, and if you think back, which sounds a long time ago, right? But if you think back to before analog became digital, you effectively had to be a scientist to produce a photograph, right? And if you think about how long that lasted, if we go back to Nephi in 1826, who apparently took the very first photograph on record in France, which was the view from the window at Le Gras, right? If we think of that time from 1826 all the way through to the 1970s, when digital cameras started to be invented by Kodak but didn't even come to the market yet then, that's a long time for the mindset of an industry and the mindset of a consumer to think it's not about what it's really about. So my view in putting all that together and looking back historically is that the reason why many photographers might make it about the photo, and the reason why many consumers might think it's about the photo, is that during that long extended period of time when you had to be a scientist to create a photo, we as photographers convinced ourselves that it was all about the photo. And because that's what we presented to the consumer as well, the consumer thought it was all about the photo.
So is this the kind of, so, and I don't want to say that, you know, the quality of your photograph isn't important, because it is. Taking photography that sells is very important, but I think what's important is understanding why our clients are actually buying our photography. And I think, you know, maybe in the past, when you said, as you said, when you had to be like a scientist to create a great photograph, there was value in that. So maybe in the past, there was an element of that being more important.
Sorry, I don't think it ever was important though, Jonathan. I think it was important, right? And it was important to a degree. But I think that it was still about how it made the client feel, right? Because if you go back to the Renaissance era, right, when there was no photography, right, and we go back and we study in history as to what some of the great painters used to do, the portrait painters, right? And if you go back to the Medici time, right, at that time, the great photographer or the great artists used to spend time with that family that they were creating the portraits for. And when you study that, right, they didn't just go in, hop up, put them through it, get them to pose and start painting, right? They spent a lot of time understanding. So what does my client, what does this member of the Medici family, what message do they want to send? What do they want to achieve from this painting? What message do they want to send to other people? What message do they want to send from that portrait, right? And the artist knew that that's what it was about, that it was about what our client needed from this, how it makes our client feel, how it makes those that the client interacts with, either as family or people they love, or often it was for political reasons. It was actually to make a political statement. But that's the reason for it. It wasn't about the painting. And somehow, as we transitioned from painting into photography, and photography became the main way of creating images or photos or portraits of people, that we lost that in the transition somewhere.
So Brad, Today, everyone has a good camera in their pocket. AI can create incredible photographs and images. And, it's not really that difficult to take a good photograph. So why do your clients buy? What's the reason that your clients come to your business and buy wall art, buy, folio boxes, buy albums, buy digital images, buy prints? What is the reason that they come to you for that? Is it because your dad, who is an amazing photographer, has this incredible style and they all love him and his style? Or what's the reason that they come to you?
No, it's the same reason, why, Michelangelo and Donatello were taken up by the Medici family and to be their patrons. It is how it makes our clients feel. It's for some of them status, for some of them it's value. It's where the clients see the value. The clients don't value portraits. I can remember reading in a magazine, a UK portrait magazine, and it was like a deep dive into this UK studio and talking about their ideal client. And in it, they said that their ideal client is really anybody who values photography. It made me laugh because, in my opinion, I think only photographers value photography. The consumers don't value photography. That's not why they're coming to use your business. And if you think like that, then either you're in the 0.001% who service clients who do, but even then, more than likely that they're people who care more about their own individual status than they do about anything else. But more often than not, you're actually solving a bigger problem, or not even a bigger problem. It might be a small problem for them. It's connection, happiness, confidence, hope. It's how those portraits and the experience we deliver makes the client feel. So that's why they come. That's why they purchase. It's just how you demonstrate that value, and none of that value is demonstrated through photographic art.
So I know we're coming to the end of this first episode in the series, and I know we spoke about Megatrend 1, which is the evolution of photographic equipment. And I think it's important that we be aware that the art and science of photography and the equipment, they're no longer sufficient differentiators in the market. And we've just started on the path of Megatrend 2, which is the self-centric photography industry. So we've just started to talk about that, and we'll finish talking about that on the next podcast. But for all you difference makers listening, the fastest, quickest, best way for you to become a fully booked photographer, to become a difference maker, to increase your average sales, to implement a financial system that's going to ensure that you're profitable and that it pays you what you desire and deserve from your photography business, is to be in the inner circle with all the other difference makers. Because that is where you are going to learn the in-depth, real, practical skills to create a business that fits your lifestyle. So to join the inner circle, just click on the link below and schedule a quick call. We'll talk about whether or not it is right for you and your business. There's no strings attached call. We're going to have a nice, easy conversation. You won't be forced into buying anything. We're just going to have a chat, see where you're at in your business, see if it's right for you. And if it is, we'll invite you to join. So go ahead, click the link and join us in the inner circle. But guys, thank you for joining us for this first podcast on the 5 megatrends that are affecting our industry. Join us next week when we're going to start with megatrend number 2. Bye for now.